Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Barker. I coordinate our bite-sized lectures today. I'm excited to go over mentorship with you guys today and introduce our staff, our speakers. The first thing we're going to do, though, is state our mission, as we always do, which is to emulate FCCM's mission, which is to secure the highest quality care for all critically ill and injured patients in the Southeast region by providing educational and research opportunities, as well as promoting multi-professional collaboration. Our speakers today are Andrea Sikora. She is a clinical associate professor of clinical and administrative pharmacy at UGA and author of the book Pay It Forward. Dr. David Murphy, an associate professor of medicine and a senior physician with Emory University, as well as the patient safety officer for Emory Healthcare. Kelli Keats, which is a clinical pharmacist in the medical ICU at Augusta University Health. Brian Murray, who is the MICU clinical specialist and PGY2 critical care pharmacy program director at UNC Medical Center. Nathan Wayne, a cardiology pharmacist and PGY1 pharmacy residency program director at Augusta University Health. Without further ado, I'm going to let you guys take it over.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Southeast Chapter of FCCM, for inviting all of us to be a part of this. I will put in my plug for Southeast Chapter. This is kind of where I got started with all things SCCM, and I just couldn't say enough wonderful things about the inclusiveness and the help for a brand new practitioner that didn't really know what was going on. So thank you so much. We're here today to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics with a really outstanding crew. All of these people have had the pleasure of either having to actually train me, be trained by me, or just work with me in some other capacity. So I cannot speak more highly of your speakers today. You can click next. So I just want to start off with a general introduction of mentorship before I'm going to hand it over to each of our speakers before we do a panel. I hope that the panel takes up a majority of what we're going to talk about today, because I think that some of the best conversations I've had about mentorship are when people kind of talk about the successes and the challenges, and we can kind of talk about that because you've got a lot of expertise in this room. So this is the definition of mentorship that I prefer to use. It's a combination of a bunch of different definitions that I found over the years, but I want to emphasize that ultimately this is a relationship that is highly deliberate in that you are taking active effort and thinking through the fact that you're going to be a part of this relationship. It is effortful, and this is not something that just like the magic happens and you have this amazing relationship as a result. You're going to have to put time into being, a part of that dynamic. It's bi-directional, and by that I mean that you're hopefully as a mentor you're getting as much out of it in terms of learning and growth as a mentee is getting out of it. And the two kind of key elements are mutual growth. So again, you're both developing in some capacity, as well as shared altruism. So ultimately, you guys are both representations of each other, and you're trying to see that person, be all they can be. Again, with the primary goal of the personal and professional development of the mentee. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kelli, and we will go from there.
Hi everyone, so my name is Kelli Keats. I'm a clinical pharmacist in the medical ICU at AU Medical Center, and today I'm going to be specifically talking about how mentors can improve scholarship. Hold on just a second. All right. So to kind of put this into perspective, in a variety of different residency training programs for both physicians and pharmacists and any medical profession, we really consider research to be kind of a pivotal aspect of that program. But what we've seen is that a lot of these residency research projects don't go on to be published. So in looking specifically at pharmacy research projects, the rates of publication are anywhere from as low as 1.8% up to 20% for general publication rates, which is pretty poor. And even some of the larger academic centers also report publication rates of less than 50%. And so some of the reasons why this may be is that while we value research, we don't necessarily put in the time and effort to give our trainees the right experience to be successful. So only 55% of institutions offer formal research training, and then only 65% of institutions have preceptors specifically assigned to research. So this really shows that there is truly a gap in the mentorship aspect, specifically for scholarship. There have been a couple of different proposed solutions, and the solutions I'll talk about today are all team-based solutions, meaning that Whether it's a research committee, a writing program, or a research team, the idea is that by involving more people in the research process, we're able to more adequately train our trainees to be successful on their own. So within these team-based solutions, there have been a couple of reports from different institutions that for the most part have shown pretty successful increases in publication rates. So an almost doubling of publication for both the writing program and the clinical pharmacy research team. There was another study that I wanted to mention here as well that was a single center retrospective study that found that as the number of co-investigators increased, projects were more likely to be published, meaning that when we include more people in the research process, we're more likely to kind of pass down that wisdom and make the entire team more successful. And this is really supported in the literature as a concept of team science, which has been funded by the NIH and is kind of an emerging field looking at why teams work and why they make us more successful. So there's actually quite a few learning modules online to kind of go through more information on team science and how you could incorporate this into your programs if you're interested. But some of the important reasons as to why a research team works is because we're increasing the number of ideas. We have more thorough review because you have more people reviewing the project. There's shared decision-making and responsibility. You may be able to bring in people with individual expertise. Overall, better project vetting, meaning that projects that go forward are probably more likely to be successful because they've been really well thought out. And then you have a potential for higher level research. And this has really been seen kind of throughout history as well. So this figure is looking specifically at the number of papers written in comparison to team size. So on the x-axis, we're looking at years, and then on the y-axis, it's the number of papers. And you'll see that at the beginning of the graph in the 1960s, the majority of papers were written by 5 or fewer authors. But as time has gone on, you start to see more teams including larger numbers, so over 1,000 authors, over 100 authors, showing that truly team science is an emerging field and forces this collaborative approach to research. But one of the questions you should be asking yourself is, does it matter who is on the team? So we know that more people helps, but does it matter which people are on the team? And that's something that my institution specifically has been looking at to determine how we could make our residency programs more successful. So we reviewed our PGY1 research projects for the past 11 years to look at what factors were associated with higher rates of publication in peer-reviewed journals. We included 53 projects and had an overall publication rate of 34%. So through these studies, we saw a couple of really interesting results that have a lot to do with mentorship. So when we were reviewing our projects, we were not only looking at the resident itself who was in charge of the project, but also the people who were supporting them. So we saw that projects who had a senior mentor who had at least 3 publications were significantly more likely to have their projects published in full, so 75% versus 22%. And we saw similar results with projects where the mentor had at least 1 first author publication. So truly any amount of publication experience was beneficial in helping train our residents. We also saw some pretty impressive increases when we included faculty on the authorship team. I will mention a separate study that looks specifically at the H index and found that study groups with a positive H index and a higher H index were predictors for publication for pharmacy residency projects. So here's our publications by specialty, and I just wanted to point out here that our colors in red and yellow are projects that were published as an abstract or published in full. And you'll see that we have been most successful in publishing critical care and oncology, which is probably likely because we have faculty who are on site in both critical care and oncology, showing that truly this level of mentorship really can improve our success of our projects. But ultimately, why this matters is that we found that for our residents who published their PGY1 project, they were more likely to go on to publish future projects. So residents who published their PGY1 project as of 2022, when we looked at our data, They had a median number of publications of 5, compared to residents who didn't publish their PGY1 project had a median publication rate of 1 publication. So in conclusion, our mentors with publication experience are associated with higher rates of publication for PGY1 projects. And overall, while we saw that these rates are low, mentorship can potentially impact project success. And the reason for this is really related to this graphic that I've shown here, which is that all of these things are intertwined. So mentor networks, layered learning, team science, they all have to work together for us to be successful. And finally, we saw that publication during residency is associated with higher rates of future publications because these residents can then serve as project mentors in the future. And ultimately, that's what we want, is we want to create more mentors to encourage success. And I will pass it on to Nathan.
All right, hello everyone, my name is Nathan Wayne. Thank you for the introduction. For the next section, we're going to take a little bit of a different turn. And we're going to talk about some unique challenges and opportunities for early and mid-career mentoring. So you just finished training, whether that's schooling, residency, fellowship training, and now you're going out into oftentimes your first job in your real career, and you're going to be expected to do some different levels of mentoring and some unique challenges that you may encounter. So these specifically being what I've listed here on the slide, if we can click through them. So all to none is a feedback in regards to feedback is what I mean by this. So when you're in training, whether that's in school and you're constantly getting graded on tests or assignments, or in residency when you're constantly receiving feedback on your performance and both formative and summative feedback, you're getting it all the time. And then you go out into your first career and you may meet with your manager, your supervisor, at the first quarter mark, maybe the 6-month mark, and then it kind of fades into the annual evaluation. So you're often not getting the same level of feedback to help you know if you're still within your guardrails that you have previously been used to. And so one unique thing about mentorship is that this can provide you with that feeling of feedback and to bounce ideas off of, even though it's not necessarily a formal process the way that you're used to having. Another unique challenge and interesting phenomenon is what I like to refer to as the valley of despair, which is the graph that I show here in terms of confidence and experience. So that first peak in your confidence, I think, really occurs to a lot and happens to a lot of people right after you finish your training. And as you move into that first role, and this can happen in many different ways, when you finish school and go into residency versus when you finish residency going to fellowship, or fellowship into your first job, you can see that as this starts to decrease down, you're getting into your first real career role, and you're noticing and you're realizing just how much a lot of times you feel like you don't know and you still have left to learn. And so we really want to make sure that this curve starts to trend back up as you gain more experience, and the way that I've shown here on the slide. And I think that mentorship is one way that can help that. So as you grow and you go through mentorship and becoming a mentee yourself, and you're mentoring others, you really get a return on investment that helps you to gain that knowledge, skill sets, and experience to increase your confidence again, so that this curve doesn't stay flat and lead to ultimately more burnout. And then the last unique challenge is rising to the top. So like I mentioned with the feedback from all to none, in school and in different layered learning models throughout your training career, often, we start at the bottom, we kind of go to the top, but we're not really at the top of this proverbial food chain for feedback until you're really in that first role in your career. Now you're expected to really be the person who guides all the other layers of the layered learning. And so this is also a unique challenge that, a lot of times we're thrown into and can be frustrating. All right, and then the last thing I'll talk about is a same task, but a new setting. And so what I mean by this is similar to, feedback. You've been giving feedback to your preceptors or, whoever's guiding you on a research project. And, that's good, but it's different now that you're on the other side of that and you're providing different types of feedback to your learners that you're helping to guide, whether that's on rotation or through a project or something else. Similarly, you've always updated your CV kind of at each milestone of your career, and now you're also going into a new milestone where you're having to say, okay, I'm out of residency or I'm out of training, how am I going to update my CV now? how am I going to start including the things that I'm doing in my career and my job that may not necessarily be deliverable that I could actually just have a line item for? How do I actually reflect what I'm doing in my CV? And so all of those different challenges that we're posed with that you can see here can be overcome in many ways by having good mentorship yourself and then also mentoring others. So not only are these individual benefits such as career advancement, networking and connections, and opportunities and skill development, like I mentioned previously on the slide, mentorship can give you all of these things, but overall they can be additive and add up to increase both job and personal satisfaction, which can lead to more fulfillment in our professional careers and personally, which helps to decrease burnout and lead to better wellness and future resiliency. So there are many benefits to thinking about both being a mentor and also a mentee as you move into your early career. So some opportunities that there are to mentor as you become a new practitioner. Some of these may be voluntary, some of these you may be expected to do in your new role. And so I've listed them on the slide here. There's many different opportunities. And so I think we'll discuss maybe a little bit later about how much you're able to actually sign on and take on a role for, but there's many opportunities, and sometimes there's opportunities that you don't even realize is a specific opportunity, such as organic relationships that you're going to build with students and residents as you go. So I think one of the best way to be a good mentor is to continue to be a mentee yourself, right? Just because you're finished with your training doesn't mean that your mentors go away or that you don't need mentors anymore. You still do, based on all the things that I mentioned in the past and all the new challenges that you'll face now without somebody there like a preceptor that is designed to guide you. A mentor can really fill that role. And I think one of the best ways to know, well, maybe I'm in my early career, what do I need to have mentorship about? And I think that's recognizing what we don't know. And so like Socrates said, the only true wisdom is knowing you know nothing, which kind of goes back to the valley of despair. And I think when you're there and you do feel that despair or that lack of confidence, recognizing maybe where I'm feeling inadequate or I don't know something is a great place to say, hey, what, I'm going to go out and find a mentor in this area, somebody that I know has succeeded and that can help me. So how do you know what you don't know? Kind of an oxymoron sometimes we think, but listening and observing what's happening around you in your new career and your new job, acknowledging when others are giving you advice and realizing that it's advice, learning from seasoned preceptors or other mentors or research advisors or people who have been in this role for many years and have seen many challenges before and relying on them. And relying on mentors that you've already developed in the past. And then as you become more involved with other things that you're doing, don't be afraid to ask questions, clarifying questions, because you're new to things that you're doing that you may not have done before in a new task or same task, new setting. Always good to ask clarifying questions. And then ways to continue to be a mentee once you have identified that you maybe don't know something or that you'd like to have some more mentorship in this area are listed here on the slide. And like I said, some of these may be something that you're expected to be involved in, like institutional committees and service line involvement, but taking on more roles with residency or fellowship training, whether that's research or precepting or different opportunities, journal clubs, so on. And of course, those organic relationships that we've talked about before. And then of course, professional organizations such as FCCM, always opportunities for mentorship there and building those relationships to continue to get all the benefits from mentorship. And so just a few, I think, pitfalls that we may sometimes fall into, and I'll leave you all with this, just some tips and tricks that I have personally seen and kind of grown through in my early career is being cognizant of all of your committees and responsibilities and things that you're trying to sign up for when you are looking for both mentorship and mentee opportunities and your time commitments. And then remember to be open-minded and avoid projecting maybe something that you wish you had done or maybe a regret that you have personally in your own training or your own path onto a future mentee. Everybody's goals are different. There's many different avenues to get to the same place that you would like to be. or that the learner would like to be, and so that it doesn't have to be the same road that you took. It's just more of providing examples of your recent experiences, defining the expectations and realistic expectations for your mentees, and then also making sure that you're showing them all the different roads that one may take. And then, of course, as always, remembering the why behind why you want to mentor, why mentoring is important, and then always asking questions. I think it's a great way to continue to grow and learn.
All right, hey everybody, my name is Brian. I'm not at Augusta University Medical Center. I'm a clinical pharmacist at the University of North Carolina Medical Center in Chapel Hill and the program director for the critical care residency program out here. I'm going to be branching off from a couple of those points on the last slide to talk about embracing the concept of less is more in your mentorship and in your own early career practice. We can go to the next slide. So to get us rolling here, I want us to start out with an exercise. I want everybody to think about all of the committees and working groups and projects and any service not directly associated with your day-to-day job responsibilities that you have on your plate right now. Think about how much time that takes up in your day or in your week or even in your year. And now think about how many of those commitments actually require your specific expertise or experience versus those that could be done by almost anybody. And now think about how many of those commitments you made a long time ago and have just more or less found yourself doing ever since then. So you've kind of gotten stuck in those roles. I'm not trying to fill everybody with existential dread here, but the fact is that everybody on this call is busy. So if you're going to be busy anyway, you should be busy doing things that are important, things that you really enjoy, and things that you have time and energy to do a great job with. And ultimately, we want to encourage our mentees to go down that same path, not to be busy just for the sake of being busy, but to be busy doing the things that they enjoy and that they find important. So the next few slides focus on conversations that I think are worth having with your mentee to help them not fall into that trap, and some things that we can do as mentors or program directors to assess your own practice. Go to the next slide. So I'm going to be framing this part of the discussion around three major points of emphasis. These include setting your goals and priorities, getting comfortable saying no, and then assessing your plate. And by this, I mean your own plate, your mentee's plate, or the plate of your residency program if you happen to be an RPD on the call. So we'll start out with setting a goal or a priority, which is a key to finding direction early in a career and will make subsequent decisions about what to take on in your career much easier and clearer to make. If you know what your priorities are, then the answers to a lot of those questions become obvious. It's easy to reach the end of residency training or get that first clinical specialist job and think, I did it, I'm here. All this stuff that I've been working towards for the last 4, 6+ years, it has all come to fruition. But as many of us on the call have probably experienced, it's not long after that that we start to think, well, now what? Now I've been doing this job of a clinical specialist for a couple of years. What comes after this? Spinning your wheels in the early years of a career can lead to a sense of dissatisfaction, disconnection with the work, and ultimately this leads to that dreaded burnout word that we hear a lot these days. So asking these three questions can help you frame your priority and give you a direction and a goal to focus your energy towards. The first thing that we want to start with is, what am I inspired by, or what do I value? The importance of answering this question is obvious. Doing work that doesn't inspire you will leave you disillusioned about the value of the work that you're doing. The next question should be, what am I good at? Given the skill set that I have or the skill set that I want to develop, how can I contribute to the things that I value? What can I do that other people can't? And then finally, we should be figuring out how our priorities and skills fit into the system around us by asking, where is there an unmet need? This can either be at the institutional level, or this could be on a broader scale. For example, if you are interested in national involvement or advocacy. So as an example, say you have a resident or an early career pharmacist who's passionate about education they're a patient and capable teacher. Your institution has more learners than they have preceptors who are able to handle them. This is an excellent alignment of values, skills, and needs. So allowing and encouraging that individual to prioritize precepting and education is in the best interest of everybody involved. So getting to the point where your activities and commitments can be aligned with your priorities sometimes means saying no and doing it effectively and without feeling guilty. So unfortunately, residents and early career pharmacists almost universally have a hard time doing this. We can all think of a time that we said yes to a request just to avoid having a conflict, or because we are people pleasers, or because we felt important when somebody asked us to be involved with something. And then instantly we regretted it. Like as soon as you walked away from that conversation, you were kicking yourself. We can help our mentees and our future selves to avoid those pitfalls. So part of why saying no is so hard is that you feel like you're going to burn bridges or upset people, or maybe disturb your career path by getting on somebody's bad side. So when coaching your mentees, it's important not just to focus on when to say no, but also on how to say no in a way that is professional and that leaves open the door to working on something in the future. It's terrifying for a lot of people to take that step, but getting comfortable with phrases like, let me think about it and I'll get back to you, or I don't think I can take that on right now. Those simple phrases can go a long way, and they don't necessarily slam a door. It's also important to remind your mentees, and sometimes to remind yourself, that you have autonomy over your own experience. You don't have to do anything just because you were asked. You don't have to do anything just because somebody else is doing it. So along those same lines, we should be encouraging our mentees to ask not what else can I be doing, not what else out there is there for me to do, but what else should I be doing to get to where I'm trying to go. And if what somebody has asked you to do does not fall into that bucket, they should probably be saying no to it. Another aspect of reluctance to say no is a fear of missing out on an opportunity. So people feel like if they say no to writing a book chapter or working on a project, that opportunity will never come around again. But it's important to remember that no for right now is not no for forever. These opportunities can and almost always do come back around. And when it comes back in the future, it might be a better time for you to work on it. Now, for you early career people out there, or those of you who are mentoring an early career person, you have to watch out for the paradox of progress in those first few years of your career. If you're doing a good job, you're going to be asked to do more and more and more until eventually you're doing so much that you can't do a good job anymore with the things that you're doing. And that's not a good place to let yourself get into. And as a mentor, you can model this practice as well. So practice by doing a gut check every time you get a new request. When your mentees see you say no to a request or an opportunity, they understand that it's okay for them to say no. And then they get to the understanding that if it's not a heck yes, if it's not something that they're excited about, maybe they should say no to it for now. I'm going to shift gears to talking to your mentees about assessing their plates or encouraging them to assess their own plate. And a couple concepts here to drive this home. The first thing is that there's no such thing as 110%. We hear that all the time from athletes on TV talking about giving 110% to the team. There's no such thing. There's only 100%. If you're at the buffet at Golden Corral, it's a sign of wisdom and maturity if you think about what you're going to put on your plate before you get in line. Otherwise, you're going to fill up on the first couple of things and you're not going to have room on your plate for dessert. So we need to do the same thing when we're at work and be mindful about constructing our plate, not just throwing things on at random, considering what happens to be in front of us. So be intentional. And for the foundation, remember first and foremost what your priorities and your goals are, along with achieving sustainable work-life balance. The second step is to reassess your plate regularly. So again, just because you started doing something doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. When I was early in my career, education and residency training was a big priority for me, and I was given the opportunity to run our resident CE program and case conference program, which was great in the first couple years of my career because it was a way for me to get involved. But as the years progressed, I took on an RPD role and I took on committee work and other responsibilities, and my plate became overfull. And I was still doing this CE program and this case conference program 8 years later. This was no longer something that was adding value to me, and it was no longer something that I was adding value to, but it's just something that I didn't even think about taking off of my plate. So unless you sit down and really think about what you're doing and what you can take off, sometimes you'll wind up getting stuck in something unexpectedly. And lastly, a really good point here, saying no, which we talked about a couple slides ago, is not the same thing as taking something off of your plate. Saying no keeps you from putting something else on your plate, but it does not reduce your burden. So think about those two things as separate ideas. When running a residency program, think about what the yearly plate looks like for your residents. We all want to innovate and improve our programs and the experiences that we offer, but most of us think about improving our programs in terms of what can we add? What other things can we put into the program that give our residents other opportunities? But you're going to reach a point of diminishing returns, where as you add new programs, you are giving the residents less time to do the things that matter the most. So take a second look, use feedback from your residents and figure out which of these things are really value added, which things can we combine, which things can we take away to allow as much time as possible for the things that really matter. And then thinking about your plate as a mentor. Remember that there will be many opportunities to serve as a mentor, and you are going to do a disservice to your mentees if you have too many. So make sure that they know what they want out of the relationship, and that you are the right person for that mentoring relationship. And that means that you have the skill sets or the connections or whatever it is that they are looking for as a mentor. If you don't, you can do more of a service to them by helping them find the right person than you can by taking them on as a mentee. So you'll do a better job as a mentor if you practice what you preach through this whole process. Don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, I can't commit to this right now, or I'm sorry, I don't think I'm the right person to serve in this role. As another point to this, think about how many mentees you already have. A mentoring relationship, as Andrea said, should be a relationship. That means that it requires time and it requires effort. And if you don't have the time and effort to put into it, again, it would be better to focus on you and let that person find a mentor that does have the time. And then also remember that you as a mentor are most useful to people when you are working on yourself, when you're developing your own skill set and progressing your own career. So in the process of mentorship, don't lose sight of you, because that's going to be the biggest thing that you have to offer somebody else.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk about some practical tips under the concept of what I call finishing the drill, which basically means that, you know, when you take on a project or a mentee, you want to finish the drill. You want the project to be truly finished at the end of it. You want to be there for that person. As someone who has had a couple of different situations where it's, oh, we're going to write this paper, and then it comes to nothing, but I have hours put into the literature search or still have documents in my Dropbox that will never come to anything. And I keep those folders in there, even though they kind of bother me as unchecked boxes in my life, to remember that I don't want to do that to somebody else. So a lot of what we discussed here kind of gets towards that, and it's, you know, thoughtful to think about your plate, but then also these are going to be some tips to kind of help you think through how to best find a success for both of you. We can go to the next slide. You can go to the next one. I got excited. All right, so the three key concepts that I want to talk about are valuing relationships and valuing specifically the mentor-mentee relationship, the concept of integrate, don't create, and then finally task matching. Next. So integrate, don't create. So this is kind of one of my key rules, which is that someone comes to me and says, I'd really like to work with you on something, or I really want to do a research project. There is a temptation that you're like, oh yeah, let's think of something. What do you like to do? And then all of a sudden they have some cool project and it does not align with your career priorities, what your position or your boss wants you to do. And it's just kind of like this nebulous project off to the side. And what happens as a result of that is you don't necessarily have the time and energy to put forth to that. So a way to kind of avoid that is to chunk off existing projects that you can get mentees involved with. So if you're already going to be, you know, writing up monograph for P&T, have the mentee help you with the research, with the background, search, and have that be their skill, that they learned how to use PubMed, they learned how to use EndNote, they learned how to write up a table that is useful to them. If you need figures created for a manuscript, have them learn how to use BioRender or something like that to help you. And these are ways that you can give credit for what they're doing and participating in whatever project you're doing. It's a discrete skill that you're going to be teaching them of how to do it, but then also it's actually like helping you, or you're at least time neutral with whatever you taught them versus what they're doing for you. This can help to make sure that the work is high value for both of you, that again, they're getting a skill, but you're getting something that is already aligned with things that you need. And importantly, you have to give credit for contributions. So whatever they are involved with, you need to find ways that this can be something that they can talk about in residency interviews, put on their CV, that they're getting credit for this. Within this, very important to discuss return on investment. So if you've hung out with me at all, you will hear me say ROI. What is the ROI for this? What is the ROI for this deliverable? And what I'm looking for here is that you have what your return is again something that is truly helping you build within your career. It's a new skill, it's a new domain that you're going forward. It's not just that you're doing more of the same thing. When you're assessing this, the scope of your project should be appropriately ambitious in that it's, again, something that's new and novel to you. So if you've already done, 6 peer reviews in the last 6 months, that's great. It's a service to everybody, but at the same time, maybe you need to work on something else that is different. The project needs to be accountable in that it needs to bring value to the mentor, the mentee, as well as the actual profession and the network that you're working within. So you don't just want to be doing things that are, you don't want to publish something that no one actually needs to read. That would be too bad. And finally, the project needs to be advocated. So again, this is the concept that you have to have the requisite time and experience to ensure the project can be successfully completed. So I've had different people that have, invited me to work on different things, and it's like I might love the person, and in some concept I might love that topic, but if it's not something that is directly related to like my line of research inquiry or things that I already have on my plate, it's incredibly hard for me to take time and go do that. And I think we all have those kind of areas. The other thing too is if it becomes difficult to start to have to like relearn from scratch all these different areas if you're not kind of aligning your different interests in this way. The other part I would say is that projects need to go undergo an after action review or a debrief. So every time I do something with someone, my general rule of thumb is I try to be like, this is what I hope you learned. What did you actually learn? This is how you would put it on your CV. Okay, this is maybe things you would talk about. And we just talk about the process, provide feedback, all those kinds of good things. Task matching. One of the things that I have seen people do is they think, oh, I have this really big research project I want to do. I need to go find a student, or I need to find a resident that's interested in this project. And that always makes me nervous because you may or may not actually know if that person is the right match for that task. And so my advice to this is to do, I call it an underhand toss. I like to do an underhand toss to somebody, and it's usually a short turnaround for the timeline because it's not that big of a project. It's a highly concrete deliverable. I would like you to do this literature search. I want you to do this graphic. I would like you to attend this specific experience. And you see whether or not they can handle it, essentially. So you learn how the other person works. So you learn if they're, an early or late emailer, if they don't reply at all those kinds of elements that are helpful for you to kind of get a feel for somebody. And then at that point, you can say, okay, you've graduated, you caught the underhand toss, we can scale up to the next project. It doesn't mean that if someone doesn't do a great job with the first project that you write them off for forever, but it's probably not the person that you're going to bring on to this nebulous evolving project that you have a lot of stake in that moment, because it's likely going to be a lose-lose for both of you. And again, it allows those kind of early initial projects allow for ways for them to build skill sets that then become useful to you. So generally speaking, whenever I think about inviting someone onto a larger scale project, it's someone that I have already worked with and have a feel for like how this dynamic is going to work the best. And I have found that creates far more win-win situations than just kind of like almost a cold call email. And finally, valuing the relationship. So, one of the most important things that we can think about is how can we, especially this is true of, I would say the younger generations, so millennials, Gen Z, is they want to understand why is it important? What is this doing? But it's hard to answer that question for someone if you don't know them, if you don't understand where they're going. So it's nice to be able to, I usually call it a life chat, and I usually ask the broad goal of like, what do you want to do when you grow up? What are things that excite you? Because I want to have a feel for, what kind of projects they're going to like to do and how I can, specifically sell this task will help you in this way. So spending some time to discuss career goals, discuss their academic goals, review their CV, offer to review their cover letter, things like that can help grow and facilitate the relationship. One of the things that I've also found is that a lot of junior people they're nervous to ask for your time and they're nervous to ask for support, and so I have made it more of a practice personally to just offer or even to just say, please send me this, because I know it's something that likely they need and likely they will benefit from, and I just want to have that door open as quickly as possible. So again, to me, mentorship is a cornerstone for all of learning. So you're moving beyond what we're talking about here is far beyond the didactic skill set. It's far beyond a specific topic discussion and gets into all of the project management, emotional intelligence, all of those far more nebulous skills where it's helpful to have someone who's been around the block to help you. Another concept here is with regard to layered learning, and I think that what I wanted to add here is that when we're thinking about the task matching concept as well as creating a fruitful learning environment, what you want to do is think about how can you bring different people in that are at different levels. So there's a situation where you have someone who has worked with you, they're still maybe a mentee, but they're they're graduating up in terms of the number of things that they've done. And you say, hey, okay, you're going to be the first person to take a look at this abstract that this student wrote, or you're going to be the person that's going to help pitch this methodology, so that they can kind of start to feel, what that feels like to have kind of graduated experiences. So it's kind of like mentoring experiences. And I really enjoyed those conversations far more than I thought I would at this point in my career, of when I have kind of a former mentee who comes in and says, I have a current mentee and I have a question for you. How would you approach this? And I think that kind of creating those environments can be incredibly important. So personally, my metric for success is the success of a mentor is not in how many students you've trained, but it's in how many mentors you've created. And I like to think that that's something that I'm looking for. It's part of why the title of the book is Pay It Forward. So if you're interested in more on this topic, you can check this out here. But there are many wonderful resources, and I think probably the most important resource is yourself and just putting an effort into these relationships. So with that, I would love to take any questions that you all have. We have an outstanding panel here, so please feel free to put it in the chat box and so forth. And Nick, if you want to help us moderate that, that'd be wonderful. Maybe I should say, I'll kick it off. Dave, what do you think? What are some thoughts that you have after listening to us chat?
Thanks. So I think it was terrific, actually. I think everybody brought their own perspective, but there's some, I think, some common themes that we see. And first, I think it requires courage. So the courage of the mentor to be open and available to say yes or no, depending on what's available, to be able to direct the mentee, so that there's overlap and there's an appropriate connection. It requires the courage of the mentee to either cold call or approach the mentor, or follow through and be introduced and be honest. I think I also heard a theme related to intentionality, and that's the intentionality of the role that a mentor plays. And that may be a general mentor, it may be a mentoring in a specific content area, it may be overall career development. And also intentionality of what are people looking for, which is sometimes a hard question. Sometimes people don't know, and helping them through that can be quite valuable. And probably the third thing I'd put in there that I heard was the impact of mentoring as succession planning. The term wasn't exactly used, but I think it covers that. So as a mentor, you're looking for people who can take on things, and how do you develop that next generation? That really comes through the mentoring, and how do you help those folks to be successful? So I'm going to stop there, but I heard a lot of really good themes, a lot of good content within there. So thanks.
I'm not very good with this chat function. Can we see other
Hope you're good.
questions?
At this time, does anybody have any questions? Please put them in the questions. I think we have one here, and it's for Andrea regarding chunking and aligning. Using BioRender for graphics, your credit, but mentees may need to market themselves for their next career move, job, residency, etc. Sometimes those chunking tasks aren't easily captured on a CV. How do you ensure that the mentee both acquires the skill, but also leverages their self-promotion and marketing for their next career step? If that doesn't really go on a CV, I think mentees sometimes aren't interested or motivated.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair point on the mentee's part, which is why am I doing something that I can't capture? But probably goes with one of my other key tenets in life, which is, you want to do things that are value add, you want to do things that are altruistic, all of that, but you also want to get brownie points for what you're doing. There's a funny thing within the academic world called a NAPA, which is a not a promotable activity, and you want to avoid NAPAs. And I think that's good advice. So the question is, when you're creating these projects, how can you give credit? And so that's where sitting down with some of these conversations is really helpful. So again, like if you're thinking about a monograph or something like that, where like you want some help with that, you could say like, you can put this, I have most of my students and residents, I have them create what I call a project section, and I have them put a title of the project, I have them put what it is, what they did, and I also have them put my name under there as the preceptor or the advisor. And the beauty of that is then someone can say, oh, that's cool, you know her, and and it's always, that's what we do on CVs, right? We all scan to look for who we know. And so there's a part that I think that's helpful, but then you're also in there, they're advertising what it is they learned, and they can speak to that in a cover letter or on, in an interview. I tend to have a very inclusive attitude towards authorship on posters and papers of, if I can find a way to make you an author, I will. And so a lot of these things, when I'm thinking about it, I am very much trying to find a way to justify that they're going to be on the paper, on the poster, part of the grant, whatever it is that we're doing, because I think that directly helps them, but it also, it directly helps me too. This is very much a win-win type experience. And again, BioRender is a great example that I pick in particular, because that actually was a mentee that told me about that program. I had asked him to make a figure for me, and we had worked a lot on this project. He was the first author on it. He goes, yeah, I've learned about this different program, and you can do some stuff, but if it was paid, we could have more with it. And it turns out it's an absolutely fantastic program, but you're not going to have those conversations with a mentee if you're not, putting yourself in that situation. It's kind of like it's hard to meet others if you're only in your house, So, but yeah, if you have a specific like example or whatever, I think I've been able to find a way to give someone credit for just about anything that I've ever been involved with. And if someone told me they hadn't, I would be horrified about it.
Another question that we had was a general question for the panel related to Kelly's slides regarding mentorship and scholarship. Critical care and oncology published because faculty in those areas, a mentor with at least 3 community publications was predictive of success. What about community hospitals that may not have faculty? And what about kickstarting some success for places that don't have a track record for publishing? Any outside resources, mentorship programs to get things going?
I can start with that answer, and then Andrea will probably jump in with some other opportunities. But I think based on what we saw with our research, it really is important to have people who know what they're doing, because otherwise you end up with the blind leading the blind. But I do think that there are a lot of opportunities to get involved, even if your center doesn't come with faculty or people with a lot of experience, because we do have so many ways to be interconnected between institutions. So things like multi-center research, or participating through FCCM, I think there's lots of opportunities to gain some of those writing skills that you could then take back to your home institution. So I know just within FCCM alone, there are so many opportunities for writing specific chapters or newsletters or reviewing literature that I think helps you gain some of those skills to then bring back. But everyone else, feel free to jump in if you have other ideas for ways to get those.
Yeah, I think from a research perspective, the Discovery Network within FCCM is probably a really good, and I think it is a nice local, or I get society-specific multi-center group. So I would go to those meetings, interact with the investigators there, and be a co-investigator, and then use that opportunity to perhaps become primary investigators and propose your own research.
Yeah, I mean, SCCM in particular has within the research subsection of CPP a peer review service, so I think that is something huge to look for. But this is also, I mean, I will put a pitch in for the 4-line email. You can write a really nice 4-line email to someone. Hi, I would really like to do this project. I believe you are an expert in the field. I could use some insights. I could use your help. And it might be that you have a 30-minute phone call with someone and they just give you some good advice, but you may also start up a really meaningful relationship. I'm gonna call out Dave here. I think it was a few more than 4 lines. I think we've got all the way to 2 paragraphs in that email, but it was literally like a cold call email of like, we had never met each other. And I was like, I could use someone for my master's thesis. I could use someone to take a look at this grant that I want to write. And is this something you could be interested in? And, years later, here we sit with, I have a fancy degree on my wall, thanks to him. I have, a couple different grants that I'm very proud of, but the other option was I could have just not, written that email. And what was the worst I was out of? If he just didn't reply, okay, try someone else. So you have to me as a project lead, the most important aspect of being a project lead is actually being the person that helps identify resources. So even if it's a project lead for your own project, you have to be in charge of finding those resources. And I hopefully you won't take no for an answer. And I think that SCCM has great resources. And also, like, all of these people, I mean, I feel like I have probably talked to Rita, Ayan, Marina, all these people at some point with a question, and they have happily given me some direction that led me to wherever I was going. All right. Brian, Nathan, you have any other thoughts?
No, I agree. I mean, there are networks and resources all around. You just need to know where they are and be comfortable asking for help.
These are great questions. What else do you have?
Yeah, we've actually got a couple more questions in here. Let me read the next one for you guys. Did you ever have to end a relationship with a mentor due to unaligned goals at some point, and how would you politely address that?
Anyone else want to take a shot?
So I had to do that, and I basically said something along the lines of, you guys are really fun to work with, and doing really important work, but it's not something that I could see me doing for the rest of my life. And so I need to make a change. It went pretty well, actually. So that was my approach.
Yeah. I actually consider this almost a little bit like a breakup. You know, you can have a friend breakup, you can have a little bit, you know, romantic breakup, obviously, but it is a little bit of a breakup because this is a relationship you've definitely invested into. You feel some degree of loyalty, again, altruism, growth, you feel gratitude, all that kind of stuff. And there can be moments that are rocky where it's like, this is just not a good dynamic for us. There are things where it's like, we just have to make a split with regard to careers and things like that. And I think, you know, kind of as Dave said, if there's a way that you can acknowledge all the good that's happened, and also that you still like root for that person and care for that person, but you just cannot be in that particular dynamic anymore because it doesn't align with what you're doing. I mean, I think those words are very meaningful. And it's certainly, you know, I mean, I might be sad if someone said that to me of like, oh, I really enjoyed working with you, but I also would not be like, you know, I would still be excited for them and still would want to hear about what they're up to and things like that. And I think that's kind of gets into the 4 stages of what a, you know, mentorship is. And there is a final stage which kind of has a divergence period, but you can also diverge and then come back as peers, colleagues, etc., in a really, I think, a beautiful way.
I've been fired as a mentor a couple of times, and like honestly, it has never hurt my feelings that bad. In some cases, I feel like the people have grown beyond what I can offer them as a mentor in certain areas of their career, or in other cases, like the dynamic just wasn't what they were looking for. But I think you can be appreciative of the time and effort that somebody's put into you and be honest about what you're looking for in a new relationship. And most people are not going to take that badly, I don't think.
What was the last question, Nick, or the second to last one that you mentioned?
Next one I have is it worth doing a master's in clinical research? This person has no background in research, but is very interested in clinical trials.
I mean, it's absolutely redefined my career to do a master's in clinical research. It was the epitome of realizing all I didn't know. If we could draw a line on my CV before and after the master's program, I almost want to delete a lot of those papers because I am like, I don't want to say embarrassed of them, but it's like, I would approach them so differently in terms of what I would do. So yeah, I mean, it's a whole different skill set than what we are trained for clinically, and how you approach a research problem, approach the whole process, that kind of stuff. And again, kind of speaking to that 4-line email and getting resources, I remember I went in and, you know, there was a grants class, and the grants person was like, I'll meet with you for 30 minutes to talk about it. And she's like, wait, you haven't talked to anyone that's actually done this before? Wait, you haven't talked to this person or this person or this person? And I was like, I didn't even know I should or could or any of that. And she's like, okay, this is your homework. Go do this. We will meet in a month because you're going to need a month to do all these things. But that was, I mean, I don't think I would have had that type of advice or that type of time unless I had pursued the program. So yeah, if you're serious about high-level research, I don't think you're going to be able to do that without formal training. I mean, there are certain people that have done it, and kudos to them, but I certainly have drunk the Kool-Aid that the degree is necessary. I don't know, Dave, what do you think about your PhD? Was it necessary for you?
Yeah, I mean, so it's an investment.
Yeah.
And if you think you like the idea of research, before you sign up for a formal long program, you probably want to make sure that you actually do like it. So I would pursue that first, and just get some basic involvement, participation, smaller projects, really to understand and help you define what you're looking for. And then after that, I think if you're looking to lead and grow in it, the vast majority of people get a significant benefit from formal training, and the quality of the product that's coming out from that work is I think dramatically higher. So absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, I basically, even though I had protected time personally to do that through a KL2 program, I probably didn't do an amazing job managing that protected time because I still felt like I had a full-time professor job, and I was traveling 2.5 hours from Atlanta to do this, and I was taking a full course load. That was a pretty tough period of my life, to say the least. I would put that on par with what residency training was like. But given that, I would have different advice that I would give someone else who wants to do it, and I would absolutely still recommend it to someone else. You'll never regret extra training. I don't think you'll ever regret new knowledge, especially if you actually like really want to do that type of research.
And I've got one last question, and we'll finish on this with you guys. They're saying, I'm sorry if it was discussed and I missed it. How do you weed out the individuals who may represent potential but are not the best candidates on paper or an interview for whatever reason? Perhaps they would be more willing to try and have wonderful grades, but for some reason are not able to represent themselves in the way others sometimes do stand out, get chosen to only find out their performance is low.
So this is the underhand toss thing that I'm kind of talking about. So I'll send someone, a small task. I have a small thing, and I just look for kind of like basic stuff of like what level they're at. Can they send an Outlook invite? Can they send an Outlook invite with a Zoom link? Are they able to write a coherent email? Are they able to set timelines? And I will sometimes give good directions, but not great directions. And I think that's maybe also just a weakness for me, is I have kind of a more of a non-detail oriented style in general. But I've also found that to be a great way to see, can someone take a project and elevate it beyond what I was imagining? Can they ask a clarifying question? Can they set their own timelines? Do they have those type of skills that they're looking for? And again, you can have students that have great grades or residents that are very good in certain domains and are really bad at those things. And you can decide that you think that person has enough potential that you're willing to take them on to be like, let's talk about how to write emails and how to set Outlook invites and stuff like that. And that can be something you want to do. It's certainly something I've done for other people, but sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth for that, or I don't feel the passion to do that. And now I know that just from those types of experiences. The other thing too is like I kind of have if you send me an email, I will give you 30 minutes of my time. That's kind of my general policy. I will chit chat with you. It probably ends up being an hour. And I feel like you can learn a lot about people in that period of time to decide whether or not you think, whether there's a spark, if you will, or alignment of things that you think you guys can do together. So, and I feel like that's a good use of my time to do that for somebody else. People have done it for me. So kind of along that pay it forward concept, you can have an hour to chit chat. But I think I get a lot of vetting in that experience too. What else do you guys think?
Yeah, you're muted.
So I think one beautiful thing about a mentorship relationship is that, it doesn't always have to be as formal as I'm going to walk you through how to come up with a research idea, or here's how to submit to the IRB. It's also things like, here's how you practically talk to people, or you ask for what you're actually needing, or I've noticed maybe you aren't sending calendar invites, right? And you're actually walking them through more of those soft skills in that mentorship role that you maybe wouldn't be doing in like a more formalized preceptor or project leader role. So I think, developing that relationship, like we've talked about, that personal relationship with your mentees and your mentors as well, can definitely help with those aspects.
Yeah, and I think again, like all those type of soft skills are really important. So even just the dynamic of, does someone give you track changes versus comments on a manuscript? Who writes the first email? Who does all those kind of things? And those are things that I spend a lot of time, do you have your camera on for a meeting? And, you can, there's plenty of times I have my camera off, and I'll admit that, but there's also plenty of times that I actively put a point to have my camera on. But helping people understand the digital body language of what those things look like and stuff like that can be well worth the time. But if you find that you have someone who just, the way I look at it is I don't have a number in my head of how much advice someone has to take from me, but I know it's not 0%. You have to take some advice. It probably shouldn't be 100% either, because that kind of means you're making a mini me, or they're just too afraid to say no to you. But I do kind of look for a pattern of somebody who, after we talked, you can tell they went and thought about it. And they're like, yeah, I thought about this. And maybe they decide not to do what I originally thought, but you can tell they went and talked to somebody else, or they did some soul searching, or they read a book, or whatever they did. And so you feel like there is value as a result of you putting that time in there. And although that can be a little bit of a nebulous gut feeling, I also feel like if I sit down with someone and I'm like, wow, they really they took something from the time with me that makes me feel like, okay, that was a good investment, then that is someone I will keep investing in. And again, that can be regardless of whether we work on a particular research project. It could just be someone that shows up in my office to chit chat for a period of time, or wants to send a text and we, talk on that way. But I think there is some magical number out there of like what someone's doing with your insights as the mentor. If they reject all your track changes, I think that kind of sends a certain message, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much for being panelists today, and thank you everyone for attending. We will be posting this as a recording, so if you missed anything, feel free to go back and take a look and watch some great insight into this. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Great job, you guys.